All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Taking End User Compute to an Epic Level with VDI Solutions. Today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and AMD and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be here with all of you today on this lovely, wonderful day to learn alongside with you. Because today we are going to explore how you can enhance your organization's virtual desktop infrastructure and get to that epic level that you have been dreaming about. And to help us unlock that success, we have a crew of top experts here with us today. This absolute rock star crew is going to provide insight, guidance, and help us explore some innovative solutions for deploying any virtual desktop environment. We have a great chat ahead of us. I cannot wait to dive in. So I'm going to start out with just a few housekeeping points to help you get the most out of your day here with us today. All right, so to start us out, I want to take a little bit of a guided tour of your audience console. Let's start with the questions window because that is absolutely one of the most important parts of our webinar today. So in that questions window, that is where you are going to, hey, you guessed it, ask questions. We want to hear from you. We want you to get interactive. We want you to get involved. We want to hear all your insightful ideas, your comments, your feedback, whatever is in your brain. We have a lot in store for you and a lot of experts here with us, and they want to be interacting with you as we go through this session. So make sure you're getting those questions in. In fact, we're going to give it a little bit of a test run right now. So everybody hop into that questions window. Give us a hi, give us a hello. Hey, Bryce. Hey, Saeed. Hey, John. I've got Kai. We've got a whole crew of people here. Keep those highs and hellos coming. Let us know how you're doing today. Let us know how your day's starting out, and say hi to the community that's here with us because we definitely want to be chatting with you as we go through this conversation today. Now, that questions window is also the best place to let us know if you do have any technical issues. Knock on wood, hopefully they don't come up. But if those tech gremlins have got a hold of you, here's step one. Step one, browser refresh. Browser refresh, probably going to clear out those little gremlins for you. But if they're really clinging on, if somebody definitely fed them after midnight, which happens from time to time, I get it. So if the browser refresh doesn't work, you're going to shoot us a message right there in that questions window and let the Actual Tech Media crew know that you are having some trouble, and we will be there to help you out. All right, the last thing I want to point out in your audience console is the handouts tab. Be sure you've spent some time exploring the cool resources and follow-ups to our conversation today. You are going to want those resources after we wrap, I promise you. So make sure you spend some time checking out that handouts tab. And the very last thing, you might have noticed that little icon down in the corner of your slide there, and that is the prizes. So we do have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away at the end of our webinar. You do need to be here live, present at the webinar, and hey, just a little bit lucky. All of our winners do need to meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those terms and conditions are, you can find all of them in the handouts tab that I was just telling you about. It's so full of information. Head to the handouts tab, scroll down to the bottom, and you will find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. And it's not just that $250 Amazon gift card we have for you. We also have a $50 best question gift card. So here's how that works. Throughout our session today, you're going to be asking those questions. You're going to be telling us all the cool things going on inside your brain because we want to hear from you. Then at the end of our session, we review all of the questions that are asked, and we're going to choose that best question gift card, the best question earning gift card. Yes, that one. And we're going to send you a $50 Amazon gift card. So even if we don't get to your question in our live Q&A together today, you are still entered to win this $50 Amazon gift card. So keep those questions coming in because, hey, it's just awesome. It adds a gold star to your day, brings up the whole engagement of the webinar, and you are entered to win that $50 best question gift card. So keep those coming in. Okay, my friends, well, with that, that is it for the housekeeping. We've gotten through all the important level setting and idea rolling out, and now we are ready to get into our conversation. So I am going to bring out our intro speaker who's going to get us started today, and that is, of course, Cal Liming, HPE North America AMD ProLiant Category Manager. Cal, thank you so much for being here to kick us off today and introduce all our rockstar crew here on the screen. I'm going to hand things right on over to you. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Jess. Throughout the day-to-day is actually going to be utilizing our industry experts that we have online. All right. So we've got Steve and we've got Pratish, but there's a lot more people behind the scenes. So as you guys are seeing this and you're going through this, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to go ahead and type those in the chat. If you need any help, type type them in the chat. We're going to be here to take care of that all for you. There's also going to be poll questions that will pop up throughout the presentation today. So as you guys do see those poll questions, make sure you're answering those. But it's also going to make sure that, you're still out there and you're still listening to us. That being said, we're going to be covering a lot of topics today, or a lot of discussion points around one single topic, which is kind of very encompassing about the VDI solutions. Steve, I think we're about ready to go ahead and kick it off here.
Hi, my name is Steve Shaw. Thank you for listening to us today. I'm a principal technology consultant. Basically, I'm HPE's worldwide SME for VDI. And I've been working with VDI technology both here at HPE and at Citrix for 15 years. And I've seen countless different approaches to virtual desktops, to application virtualization, and so forth. One of the things I wanted to start with, though, when the AMD EPYC Genoa chips came out back last fall, I was shocked, to be really honest, because normally you have a trade-off between cores and clock. Typically higher clock, fewer cores, and so forth. One of the things I want to make sure everybody understands, the higher the clock, the better the user experience for VDI. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But what we saw here was a technology leap in that AMD was able to deliver high core counts along with very high clock. And it was just an amazing thing to see. And I was shaking my head at the time, just as amazed at how much of a leap it actually was. And we're going to get into that in considerable detail today. When you look at VDI is a huge market that's growing very rapidly. So, you get involved with artificial intelligence and, virtualization itself and containers and everything else. But we at HPE have a very, very solid team that's able to put together highly complex virtual desktop environments. The largest one I've ever worked on professionally was 250,000 users. Mainly it was application virtualization, a large SAP rollout. But, in general, what we're looking at is a market that's going to just explode. And this is from Fortune Business Intelligence, but they're estimating that the market's going to go from 13 billion to 57.7 billion by 2030. And that's a 24% CAGR, which is huge. And, I've been involved with this market and I've watched it grow and grow and grow. And it's just going to continue to, because there are so many good reasons for deploying desktop virtualization, application virtualization technology. And we have our first poll question. You can take a look at this and maybe vote on do you have VDI deployed in your organization? And I'll give you a couple minutes to go through that process. And, we'll continue there. I really am interested in understanding some of the reasons why you would be interested in deploying virtual desktops and so forth. Give us another minute or two for everybody to go ahead and finish. It looks like we're starting to slow down in terms of the poll answers. So I think I'll move to the next slide. Okay. One of the things that I get into a lot is trying to come up with reasons for deploying virtual desktop infrastructure. And there are a lot of different answers to that question. But I find three of them. VDI is not an inexpensive solution to deploy. And I really base this on three different impact statements. The first one is by far client server applications. That very large project I mentioned a minute ago, that was originally deployed on a VPN. And what happened was that people, was that they would click, or they'd do a query, or they'd add some data. They'd click on that, and it would sometimes take 25 to 30 seconds in order to actually to complete the transactions. And what we found is that by taking the data and moving it close to the application inside the data center across a almost zero latency data center network, what happened to the end user experience is instead of 25 to 30 seconds, it actually decreased to 1.5 to 2 seconds. And so the reason being is that the only thing that's hitting out in the at the end user level are screens, keyboard, and mouse movements, and that's it. So, anytime you have a situation where your client server application performance is lagging and people are complaining about it, if it's on a VPN, move it into the data center and you will have a significant improvement in user experience. And that's what this is all about. Another one is a lot of applications, especially when you get into CAD, you get into computerized graphics like for movies and production, and also for geosciences. These files can tend to be very, very large. And if you try to load them even over a local LAN, it just is really slow. It can take 20, 30 seconds to load a fairly large CAD file. And what we found is that if you move that data into the data center, put it, application and data next to each other, what happens is that open and closing of files goes much, much quicker. And it's a much better user experience. As long as you're giving the end users the resources that they need to have a good experience and be equivalent to a desktop workstation, that's really what you're looking for. But one thing's for certain: if you try to, load a fairly large CAD file across a VPN connection, it can take minutes, sometimes even half a minute to load or a half an hour to load a large file. And then the save is the same thing. The reason why is that CAD products will check out each individual part in a subassembly. And so those back and forth database transactions tend to take a lot of time over a highly latent network. And so we really do recommend, and we see a lot of people using it. There's another reason why you want to do that for CAD and for various kinds of intellectual property, and that is data security, intellectual property protection, and compliance. If your data, such as in the US here, we have HIPAA for healthcare. HIPAA has huge fines associated with it. So if you have a data breach, it's going to cost a lot of money to fix. Now, if you're using a desk-side workstation, those are fairly easy for a sophisticated hacker to break into. And then once they're in, they actually have access to all of your data that your credentials allow you to gain access to. And, I've seen plenty of situations where CAD files were, downloaded or exfiltrated out of an organization. I've seen situations where, large data breaches occur and so forth. If you have desk-side workstations, that is going to be a security problem. And so what we found is that if you move those files and those processes to the data center, you can then put them in a VLAN, wrap a lot of security, firewalls, microsegmentation, things of that nature around that data so that it's almost impossible for somebody to break into it. The only thing that's really coming out of that environment are pixels on a screen. And you're not going to design a car or an airplane or something like that by trying to take screenshots of a screen. It's just not viable. And so if you can control those data files, you control that intellectual property. You also control the security of the environment itself. And so, just word to the wise is that if you have a situation where a data breach is going to be a very expensive thing, putting those users into a virtual desktop is actually a very good idea. And so if you really look at the different things, healthcare has security and issues with it. Manufacturing has intellectual property issues with it. Same with oil and gas, same with financial services, and so forth. So by deploying these into a virtualization, a desktop or application virtualization environment, you're going to get benefits that both impact positively on the user experience, but also increases the chance that you can thwart some kind of a data breach. So with that, I think I'm going to, I think we have another polling question. So I'll give everybody, what are your key business outcomes you're looking for when deploying VDI? If you could help us with that, I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to go ahead and answer. Okay, I think we're at the end. And so I'll go ahead and move on and bring talk a little bit about our server solutions. We have basically three that support the AMD, or two that support the AMD platform. Our ProLiant DLs and our ProLiant DXs, and those will come in both 1 and 2 unit form factors, a lot of processor options, a lot of RAM, a lot of GPU density. So we can, for instance, in 2 rack units, have 2, or in 1 rack unit, have 2 double wide full-size GPUs in a single RU. We use that a lot, especially in financial services. We also have our storage component, which is really designed to work inside a vCenter if you're using a vSphere environment. And that has a lot of advantages, especially when you get into accelerated applications like financial services, financial trading, CAD, and so forth, in that what we try to do is optimize the server for end user performance, end user experience. And that's a really critical thing. And that sometimes when you're dealing with those, heavy applications, hyperconverge can cause a laggy experience. But if you have like general office workers, knowledge workers, task workers, back office workers, and so forth, a hyper-converged environment can work very well. So the DX would be a direction we would go running a Nutanix platform. And so, so we have a lot of different options and a lot of different approaches, but, everybody inside HPE is really interested in one thing, and that is making sure that you always have the best user experience. So with that, I think I'm going to pass this over to Pratish and let him talk a little bit more detail about the AMD EPYC.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Steve. And hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Pratish. I'm the product marketing manager here at AMD, part of Server Business Unit. So I would like to start briefly about the 4th generation EPYC, our latest server CPU for data centers. So with the 4th generation AMD EPYC processors, we demonstrated how our hybrid multi-die architecture delivers real innovation and enables our customers with every new generation. So what we have done with the 4th generation EPYC is that we decoupled our core and IO development process that enabled us to shrink the CPU die and optimize variants for performance and energy efficiency. So with the 4th generation EPYC, you get up to 96 core per socket, and we know that with high dense cores comes also the requirements of the great memory access and IO capacity. And we set the table with the new IO die for the EPYC 9004 series that supports an industry leading 12 DDR5 memory channels and up to 50% more than the prior generation. And we also doubled our IO and AMD Infinity Fabric throughput since the last generation by basing them on PCI Gen 5 interfaces, and also added PCI Gen 3 lanes in the EPYC 9004 series to connect the devices that are less performance sensitive. So with that, you get leadership performance no matter how you slice it, per thread, per core, per server, or per cluster. 4th generation AMD EPYC delivers outstanding performances on the most critical and demanding workloads. I briefly want to touch on the AMD Infinity Guard. So with each Zen core generation builds upon the security features for the previous one. And we have incorporated mitigations for vulnerabilities known at the design time with no modification necessary to the application software. So the original Zen core has resisted certain side channel attacks in part because of the tagging of memory to threads once read into the processor caches. So this help reduces the possibility of one thread being able to view another thread's data when in use in the processor. So for the Zen 4 core, we introduced the capability of for guest operating systems in virtualized environments to run exclusively on one core, thus introducing further solutions that can help protect against side channel attacks targeted at the cache memory. And I briefly want to highlight here about the secure encrypted virtualization. So this enables hypervisor and guest virtual machines to be cryptographically isolated from one another. Thus, if malicious software is successful in evading the isolation provided by the hypervisor, or if the hypervisor itself is compromised, reading the memory from another virtual machine will expose only encrypted data for which the key is stored inside the AMD secure processor. So this is something which is provided at the silicon level. So the CPU generates a unique passcode key for each of the VMs that it's running on, therefore hence providing an additional level of security and making sure the customers are relieved that their data is secure, and helps your organization take control of the security and decreases the risk to your most important assets, that's your data. So here I want to briefly talk about how we position our various offerings in the fourth generation of EPYC. So no matter what the customer requirements are for balanced and optimized to get the balanced performance and TCO, or if customer wants to consolidate their overall infrastructure with high core density CPUs, or wants to get the best performance for their high compute required workloads and applications, we do have. So here, for some workloads, even 96 core per processors may not be enough. So these includes applications developed within the containers or virtualized environments, striving for the highest number of virtual machines or containers per server, and highly parallelized workloads. We offer the high core count CPUs and even single socket CPUs that works in single server configuration as well. So the customers can make use of that. And another one I want to highlight is our high frequency core CPUs. So when you pay per core software licenses fee, you want to get the most performance from each core. For these and for other workloads needing high per core performance, we have created a range of high frequency options with fewer cores and higher clock speeds. So these CPUs with F at the end of the part number use the same die, but with only small number of active cores per die. This spreads the thermal load across the processor's package and enables us to increase the clock frequency. So for example, if you look at the 16-core EPYC 9174F, uses 8 dies with only 2 active cores per die, enabling base frequency of up to 4.1 gigahertz compared to our standard 16-core, which is 3 gigahertz. So our high-frequency processors are available up to 48 cores. Yes. I think that concludes my portion of this presentation, and I'll hand it over back to Steve.
Great. Thank you, Pratish. Yeah, the number of cores is really critical, but more important is a lot of cores at a high clock. And so I call this the 3 C's of desktop virtualization. And those are clock, cores, and cache. Those 3 elements create a very, very highly optimized virtual desktop or virtual application server. And I want to go through kind of the specifics for each. By far, without question, the minimum clock for VDI should be at 2.8 gigahertz or above. I had a customer, this is about 5 years ago, and we got into this conversation about, well, he said, I want cores, not clock. And I told him, I said, no, you want clock, not cores. And you want to make sure that you have a fairly high clock so that the users will want to use the system. Well, he insisted, and he ended up getting a 2.1 gigahertz large core count CPU. And what happened was is that you deploy VDI on a 2.1 gigahertz CPU, you are going to have a very slow, laggy, and almost unusable experience. And so, as far as I'm concerned, and I've seen this for a decade and a half now, slow clock will be really noticeable in 3D, 2D, and video rendering especially. So what I consider minimum is 2.8 gigahertz. I like to stay at 3 gigahertz and above. And so, one of the processors that Pratish talked about was the one that was not an F, but a P, the 9554. That is 64 cores at 3.1 gigahertz base clock. It is just our go-to, and gives us the core density and at the same time the user experience that everybody is after. The second one is core density, and I mentioned the 9554. It's pretty much our go-to at HPE. And what's interesting though about this is that we can deploy a server with twice as many users for the same amount of power draw as you can with the other guys. And so, the simple fact of the matter is that power is getting more and more expensive. It's not going to get any cheaper. And the best, the optimum use of power is going to be the best thing you can do. In this case, AMD is over twice as efficient per watt than the competitor. And it just means it consumes less power and the less cost associated with deploying your virtual desktop infrastructure. Now, the one that's kind of a sneaky one here is cache. And AMD has 256 megabytes of L3 cache. So that's the cache that sits between memory and the CPU. And the more cache you have, the better. And I found VDI tends to act like a single-threaded application. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that if you have a lot more cache, you are going to have a much more even user experience with that extra cache. It's just that much better than you can with, say, a smaller amount of L3 cache. And having those combinations of clock, cores, and cache yield the ability to create a server that's substantially less expensive per user, and it has much lower operating costs for that server platform as well. So there's two real good benefits there. The users get the experience that they expect, and you're able to deploy the virtual desktops at a much lower cost. So one of the things that we get into, and my colleague Sean he and I are really into this. I think it's absolutely critical that you really understand your workload. I've seen lots of situations. I get pulled into escalations on occasion, and I've seen lots of situations where the workload was not as well defined as it should have been. And one of the things that we do here at HPE is that we have a whole methodology to make sure that we understand your workload really, really well. And we've modeled it to the point where we know how the user experience is going to end up. But, I pick on these because these are the ones that we see a lot of them. They're the most complex ones. Media and entertainment is one. It needs GPUs. It is, you need high resolution displays. And if you have a laggy experience in a media and entertainment, CGI or whatever the case may be, you will have users that are going to complain pretty vociferously about lag and so forth. And so having, again, adequate cores, but having adequate clock, we can basically enable that a diverse workforce that are geographically moved around, but actually be able to support them in an effective manner. The one that I get involved with a lot is manufacturing, so CAD, computer-aided modeling, computer-aided engineering, and so forth. It's real interesting, but data breaches here can allow the leakage of billions of dollars of R&D. And, again, if a desk-side workstation has an application running that can download a file out of the data center and work on it, you're going to have an issue associated with, that theft of intellectual property. If you're building cars, if you're building some kind of manufactured product, especially complex products and so forth, you're going to have an issue. So if you're working with things like Dassault systems, SolidWorks and so forth, Siemens NX, PTC Creo, Autodesk, and ANSYS modeling, you have the ability to keep all of those data files in the data center wrapped with very tight security around them so that there's very little chance of those being exfiltrated by a competitor or by a foreign government. Another one that we run into a lot is are the visualization files for geophysics and geology. And it's real interesting. In the oil and gas business, one of the things that they do is they shake the ground really good and they try to catch reverberations off of the various strata in the earth. And what happens is that those files start off as petabytes and ultimately end up as gigabytes for visualization to be able to see how the structure of the earth is below that certain area. They're very large files. They have lots of data inside of them that has to be kind of worked through and so on and so forth. And again, you're dealing with GPUs, you're dealing with visualization and everything else. But I've seen geophysicists have a whole server to themselves, 24 to 36 cores, a terabyte of RAM, and a big, powerful GPU just dedicated to that one user. And so, it's a huge amount of effort. But again, if you have the higher clock and you have the higher core counts, you can put 2 or 3 of those users on a single server and, again, cut the cost dramatically. Finally, this is something that I've been working on a lot lately, is financial trading, securities trading platforms. This is a situation where, again, you have GPUs involved because GPUs will help smooth out the user experience. The users themselves tend to be pretty demanding individuals. And so, it's really, really hard to give them an optimal user experience while at the same time maintaining high transaction volumes. And we're talking about, transaction speeds in, preferably in microseconds, but, maybe a millisecond or so between a data center and one of the exchanges. But you want to optimize that connection so that there's never any chance that for instance, in a hot market, that a trade gets stuck in a queue waiting for system resources to be able to process it. And if you just don't have that really snappy performance, basically the bank or the financial house is losing money on every trade. And so you're basically, selling low and buying high. And, that's the thing, is you want to be that much faster than the next guy in executing trades. And that's, we've used the AMD processor now exclusively for this kind of an environment because it's just so much better than the alternatives. So with that, that's the end of my comments. We'll get into Q&A here in a minute, but we have resources here that we'd be happy to get involved with. And if you're interested in having somebody, contact you, send an email to brent.kenny@hpe.com. So it's Brent with an N, .kenny at hpe.com. And if you want to have me join one of your sessions and discuss your project and so forth, I'd be happy to do it. So with that, Jess, I guess it's back to you.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great questions coming in. You guys definitely, both you and Pratish, hit some chords with our audience today. We have a ton of questions. Now, I know your team has been busy answering quite a few of them on live chat, but we have a few that we want to spend some time kind of exploring a little bit more, and a few questions that we're going to get into only live today. So here we are. Steve, Pratish, Cal, are you guys ready?
If I'm not, I'm in trouble.
As ready as we'll ever be, Steve. That's what we're going with. I'll take it. All right. So question here. Can your product help against the Kaiser Permanente threat? Anything that is built on the hardware side to help against these style of threats?
Boy, I'm not familiar with the Kaiser Permanente threat.
Steve, they recently had a data breach, and according to Kaiser, there were cookies on their website transmitting data to vendors. Information was disclosed as IP address, name information that indicated that the user was logged into Kaiser. What we're seeing is, are there any security features that we can help implement through the VDI solutions to help bolster that enterprise security posture that's out there?
Well, I guess the way I would answer that, and I've done a lot of work with the U.S. government and in this kind of scope. It really depends on how well you can control your east-west traffic, and also how well you can firewall off any kind of process that doesn't fit. Now, if you've got cookies involved, that can cause an issue. I'll tell you what I would prefer to do with this question is let me go do some research on it, and then I'd be happy to get back to the individual who's asking about it. I need to look at that a little bit closer. But, I believe Kaiser is using, Kaiser Permanente is using EPYC, and there's a number of things that you can do inside of EPYC to prevent those kinds of problems as well.
Maybe, yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of leave it is with a discussion around security features in general, because obviously that's top of mind for a lot of folks. So that sounds like that's a conversation to get into, and maybe what the individual needs are. And it looks like we've got Sean here who has joined in and can add a little to that as well.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we got you, Sean, loud and clear.
Yeah, so it's a tricky question. I mean, you can't, VDI is not going to do anything about cookies transmitting things to vendors or things like that. But there's a couple of security features within VDI that are just part of virtual desktops, one being non-persistence, right? So if you deploy a non-persistent image, if you set your pools correctly to refresh those desktops on log off, anything that the user picked up during that session that could be harmful is going to be purged through the session data. So that's one piece there. The other is your security posture, how you set everything up and allow access. And and then I would say the final piece would be maybe Cal, if you wanted to go into the Silicon root of trust around the platforms.
Sure, absolutely. So whenever we talk about our HPE ProLiant platforms, our Silicon root of trust actually comes from the ILO chip itself. Now, this is available across the entire ProLiant portfolio. It's not necessarily specific to the AMD portfolio. However, there's an additional security chip that's on the AMD processor that is then tied directly into the ILO chip, with the ILO chip itself having that immutable fingerprint cast on it whenever it's actually created. So that being said, it does that validation that goes out there and has not only one but two checks to make sure that all of the components that are installed in the server are the ones that are supposed to be installed in there. And then it's also going out there and validating that there's no harmful actors or no bad things have been installed outside of the operating system. Sean, is that kind of where we were trying to go with that? I want to make sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention, Silicon root of trust, at least from a hardware perspective, right? Making sure you got everything locked down. Is if you're in the DoD, everything's going to be pretty much locked down through your STIGs and everything else. So that's all handled. But then when it gets down to the level of virtual desktop, it's in your best interest to drive a non-persistent desktop if you can, and the reason being is because you don't retain anything that you pick up online, or if you've got users going out and doing abnormal things, when that user logs off, that session data is purged and the desktop is reset to zero. So There's things that you can do within the environment, and then obviously through your Active Directory GPOs and your regular security posture, you should be able to alleviate most of those security woes.
Those are things I guess.
We also have Dennis now chiming in. All our wonderful live chatters had things to add to this exciting conversation. And I want to tell you, we're getting some comments from the audience saying how much they're enjoying this answer and the information they're getting. So Dennis, keep it rolling for us.
Thank you. So I would like to repeat a couple of things about VDI. Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Maybe a little quiet, but we
hello,
got
can
you.
you hear me? So I would like to repeat what you said in the very beginning of the presentation. Right, when we talk about VDI, the whole idea is about bringing applications into the data center and keeping them secure together with the data. And hosting applications and data in the data center enables us to secure the complete environment with the proper VLAN and network configurations to prevent this kind of threat. If customers using and consuming VDI service do not need access to the public websites that collect this kind of data and using this kind of cookies, it is possible to block them with a consistent secure configuration across all of the desktops. And another measure that Sean already mentioned is about non-persistent desktops. When we deploy VDI, non-persistent desktops is the preferred solution because we can enroll pre-tested pristine image on every reboot, on every logon, and that helps to secure the environment and guarantee from these kind of threats. Thank you.
I love that. I'm gonna, Sean and Dennis, I'm gonna leave you guys on screen with us here because we've got a few more questions that I want to get to, and I'm loving following you guys through this conversation. So we'll hold on to you a bit longer here. Another question for you: what are the benefits of deploying VDI outside of a cloud provider?
Reduce latency. I can think of.
You all answered in unison on that one.
Yeah, I beat you to it. No, it's latency, right? So, I mean, obviously, it depends on your workload, like what you're trying to run. But when you look at like some of the higher end, high performance workloads, media and entertainment, oil and gas, financial services, healthcare, none of that really you're going to put in the cloud. In the public cloud per se, right? And the ideal place for that is on-prem in a private cloud, right? Where you can manage the latency, right? Once it gets into the public cloud, the WAN is the Wild West. Good luck, right?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I'm aware of many attempts to take, especially accelerated applications to the cloud. I'm not familiar with one success. I've seen dozens and dozens of attempts. It just doesn't work because basically what you're doing is introducing about 20 to 30 milliseconds of latency. And anytime you do that in any kind of an accelerated environment, you're going to have issues. But you're also, if you're just doing a standard knowledge worker, so that'd be Microsoft 365, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and, SaaS apps, those can have a marginally good user experience in the cloud, but it still won't be equivalent to a desktop. I need to put a pitch in here about our GreenLake platform. So we can take the hardware, create a private cloud that's dedicated to you, and it's not out in the public cloud at all. So if you have data sovereignty issues, it's a huge advantage. And we can give that to you. We can deliver that to you as a service with a monthly bill, so that you don't have the you don't have the heavy upfront capex experience of having to spend a big pile of money to get a private cloud up and running. You can do that with our GreenLake platform.
So, Steve, that's kind of like a public cloud experience, but private cloud experience at the same time.
Well, it's a private cloud experience without the added latency of public cloud. It's always going to be better.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, VDI on-prem the recommendation has always been to run it in its own sandbox, right, because it's a very aggressive workload, right? So in effect, it's always been a private cloud. right? So secondly, if your users use databases or connect to anything locally within that LAN, then they're going to benefit from being on site rather than the cloud, because otherwise you're going to the cloud, you're coming back down for the data, and then you're hairpinning it back up through the user experience or through that presentation layer. And that's where you get most of that latency, right? So application response times, desktop response time, all of that is going to depreciate in that model. So if you can push it onto prem, you can locate the data. Data locality is very important. So if you can locate that next to your desktops, right, and secure that over the east-west traverse, then the only thing leaving the data center, regardless of where it goes, or even if it is still on-prem and in the LAN, is the pixels and keystrokes, right? So again, it's a very, by its own nature, it's a very secure solution. And then, of course, if you drive all of those pieces together with each other, you can start to drive the performance of those users' experience.
Perfect. All right. Well, I do want to kind of interrupt a little bit here because we're getting close to the end of time, and I want to sneak in one last question. And this is going to be a two-part question because we're going to start with Pratish, and then we're going to go to the rest of you. I love that we have this. Normally, you know, people they get a little antsy about getting on camera, and this crew is like, "Let me on! I want to play too." So I love this. We've got an incredible group of experts here today. Here's the question that came in. We had an audience member wondering about what makes AMD the leader in the industry. And I'm wondering if we can start with Pratish on that, and then maybe to hand this over to Cal and Steve and Sean and Dennis and get an idea for the same question and sort of some key uniques from HPE as well. So Pratish, I'm going to ask you to kick us off and give us sort of what do you think makes AMD stand out? What makes you a leader?
So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, right, so with every generation of EPYC with our hybrid multi-die architecture, that's allowed us to expand the number of cores we can provide on a single socket without actually increasing the size. What we call as multi-die architecture or Zen 4 architecture that AMD adopted, right? So this is the first time in the industry that allowed us to not only just add more cores into the socket, but also add additional I/O capabilities and provide additional memory access capabilities that customers who are running compute-heavy workloads can make use of. And on top of that, it's our 5-nanometer design process technology that allows us to design the chip at 5-nanometer node level, providing the better energy efficiency CPU out there for our customers that ultimately helps in reducing the power consumption.
Definitely worth getting excited about. All right, so key uniques from HPE.
Pratish nailed it. I mean, I believe you're dealing with 10 nanometer versus 5 nanometer technologies, and it's just AMD is that much further ahead than the rest.
It's night and day. It's night and day. Yep. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is also kind of what, as Steve showed earlier, it's cores, cache, and clock, right? Whenever we start running through those, we're able to exceed what our competition is doing in the same thermal footprint effectively, right? Because we're still talking about the same wattage per CPU, but we're able to actually get better performance than they can with more cores, more cache, and more clock speed than our competition. The next thing that we're going to talk about with that is the way that we actually implement it in the ProLiant systems. We have more memory channels than our competition does, so we have more memory bandwidth. Whenever we start talking about virtual machines and being able to feed all of those cores, we're able to actually feed them with all the memory channels that we do have on the AMD platforms. The next thing to take into consideration is all of the processors that we have within the AMD ProLiant portfolio support hyper-threading or simultaneous multi-threading, whatever acronym or phrase that you want to use, to where all of those cores appear as 2 cores. Right, Pratish? Is that the easiest way to phrase it?
Yeah, and I would add, I'm going to add to this, right? VDI, like when you're taking all these users, it's one thing to do server virtualization, right? You got handfuls of virtual machines, right? Your utilization on those nodes is usually in the neighborhood of 35 to 40%. For VDI, the name of the game is density, right? And so, in the past, we were able to drive, when the clocks were high and the cores were matching, we were able to drive a performance and density model. What we see now, or what we had for quite a while, was only being able to either drive one or the other. Either you drive a performance model or you drive a density model. If you drive a density model, then the performance of those VMs is going to be relatively low. Now what we're seeing with AMD is that we have high cores, we have high clock, and we have high cache, right? So we're able to drive both a performance and a density model, right? So we can still deliver 3+ gigahertz to individual VM performance down to the VMs, right? Where we couldn't do that before. So this gets into node reductions, power, cooling, network ports, you name it, right? So it's, again, the name of the game with VDI is the driving that density, reducing the hardware footprint if possible, and then also being able to carry the performance with that. Something that we haven't been able to do until just recently.
All right. Sorry, I was making sure we were all set on that one. I think, unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap things up here because we are getting very close to the end of time. Although I have to say, we have a lot of questions that we haven't gotten to. So for those of you who have asked questions that we didn't get to in this wonderful discussion here, please know that they are going to get sent onto the team. So you will get responses back. You will get answers back to your questions. So if you have a question that you haven't asked that's still burning a hole, ask it now very quickly. Get it into the chat, and you will get some answers back. Guys, I want to say that you're getting a lot of thank yous and high fives from the audience as well. Still, the information clearly resonates. Before I let you go, though, I'm going to ask the team to kind of reiterate, and I know that Steve has put this wonderful slide up with lots of great links that you can all click through to. We've got some handouts in the handout section I'll remind folks about in just a second here. But if you had to recommend a next step to follow up on this webinar, what is the best way to get started and continue this conversation? What would you recommend as the next step?
Brent.Kenny@hpe.com.
Brent's one of our category managers. He's my counterpart. He's on vacation this week, so we went ahead and let him stay on vacation.
So email him lots, is what you're saying, right now, immediately.
Absolutely. Let's explode his inbox. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Brent, and he'll make sure that he's the single point of contact. He'll get you involved and connected with the right people to help answer any questions or to help you down that pathway that you need for a VDI solution.
Okay, and if you missed that, it's on the slide right there, brent.kenny@hpe.com on the screen for you. So make sure you take a screenshot or take that with you. Let's make sure that Brent has a very warm welcome when he comes back from vacation. We're going to flood his inbox with love and fills. Well, guys, I do want to say I genuinely mean it. It is such a pleasure when we see so much love and passion and enjoyment of the topic from our speakers, and I think you all really brought that to the conversation today. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, don't run away just yet, my friends, because we do have a prize giveaway in just a second here. And I also want to remind you all, if you haven't already done so, again, please go visit that handouts tab. You've got that technical validation, HPE ProLiant Compute Gen 11 servers with AMD EPYC processors. That's hard to say in one mouthful, in one breath. And then we've got HPE and AMD VDI solutions. You can talk about everything that we were just digging into, how to empower that productivity with secure and scalable VDI. So that was a huge theme that we talked about today, was that security and scalability, big opportunities here. So make sure that you've got that solutions opportunity to explore those solutions. And there's also a VDI buyer's guide, and this is going to talk about digging into the new ways of working with secure and scalable VDI. So again, just another way of looking at VDI and really reframing what we think of when we talk about security and scalability. Those are huge, right? That's a huge part of what we're considering when we're talking VDI, and if they're not, they should be. So these handouts are going to help you dig into them, explore a little bit more, remind you of everything we just heard from our speakers, and even better, take it to your team, discuss with your team. You can spend some time looking over those handouts together, and then you can book those follow-ups, email email our wonderful friend on vacation and make sure that we've got a flood of messages for him when he comes back, has that nice warm welcome. So right now, open up those handouts, make sure you've got those saved, and shoot a little message to Brent and tell him that you want to chat a little bit more. All right, so that's all your homework. Now I am going to give back to all of you because we have a $250 Amazon gift card in the wings, and that is going to someone who is here live and present. And as I said, a little bit lucky at the webinar. You do need to meet all of the actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you have any questions about those, they are in the handouts tab. All right, our lucky winner is Shivani Kataria from Washington. Shivani Kataria from Washington, congratulations, my friend. Now we will follow up with you after we wrap, so stay tuned for that. And I do want to remind you all that we will be following up with everyone who asked a question today. We're going to make sure that you do get some responses back. So please keep those questions coming in. I saw some really wonderful conversations happening today, and that is absolutely thrilling. It genuinely just lights us all up here. So with that, on behalf of the actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Hewlett Packard Enterprise and AMD for lighting us up, for bringing this opportunity to light, for making this webinar possible. And especially, and on that note, as I said, our incredible speakers here with us today, Cal, Steve, Pratish, and our behind the scenes and then on camera crew, Dennis and Sean, who were just going to be hanging out in the back end and ended up jumping in and being a part of the conversation. What an incredible conversation we got to have, right? It is really exciting when you get to see what these experts are interested in, what they, gets them pumped up, what they want to dig into and explore a little bit more. And we get to kind of follow along on those rabbit holes. It feels like we're just all sitting around at a really cool dinner table filled with really smart people and just getting to pick their brains. So I know I'm feeling all lit up and ready to go kind of decompress and think through everything I've learned. I hope that you're feeling the same. I want to send a big thank you to all of you for making time in your day to come and participate, for asking some great questions, and for being a part of this webinar today. Well, I hope that I get to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day, my friends.